A very good evening to all of you present here. Respected Mr. Mukesh Gulati sir, profession speaker of today's session, CA Dheeraj K. Khandalwal sir, Chairman of Committee of MSME and Startup, CA Pramod Jain sir, Vice Chairperson of Committee of MSME and Startup, CA Hardik Bhai Vyas, Chairman of Rajkot Branch, CA Vinayak Bhai, Chairman of Vapi Branch, and of course, members and all the participants. I, CA Akshar Mehta, Chairman of Bharuch Branch, bid a warm welcome to all of you. Welcome all of you to this VCM on Cluster Development for MSME, organized by the Committee on MSME of Startup of ICAI. Friends and members, as we all knew that government has launched various initiatives and schemes and has been very pro to the MSMEs because they knew that MSMEs will help for the development and economic growth of the India. So basically, MSME committee of ICAI basically will address the issues and challenges faced by the MSME and startups, review the implements, and to suggest measures changes in these regards for strengthening and developing the capacity of MSME and startups, the competence and improving their visibility among the business community, and to develop and provide the capacity building to promote the MSME and startups by way of encouraging collaborations among professionals and various committees. So the list of objective of MSME is very long, and with the vision and objective, today this committee has organized a seminar on cluster development, and to dwell upon this topic, we have Mr. Mukesh Gulati sir. Welcome, sir. Now, before the start of the session, I would request our chairperson of Committee of Startup and MSME to share their views and visions of MSME and address all the participants and members. Over to you, Dheeraj sir.
Thank you, sir. Leaders of the branches, I can say vibrant branches. Adisa from Rajkot, Vinayak Bapna from Vapi, Akshar Mehta from Bharuch, and the speaker, Mukesh Gulati ji, and the participant over here. I think we are organizing number of series in this MSME, and we have covered up almost 30 webinars in last 4 months. Could say 3 months, not 4 months, and launched the portal, organized. So we create a buzz about the MSME. Why? Now, the point is that, why we are doing it. Is it the first time MSME is there? No. MSME is since long. Why it's a buzz? The buzz is now when we talk about a professional opportunity, then we look upon a newer opportunity. When we talk about tax audit limit is increased and we're getting less audit, then it's going to worse. When we talk about GST audit is gone away, we need to find a new other methods, new solutions, new practices. When we heard, some other also on the ease of doing business, some of the work is also going away, then we have to find a new area of the practice. And it's not new. It's a constant. It's always be there. When we talk about complete digitalization, it has to be. Take it, from the that's a telephone. Previously, it was a dial phone number, and then it's push button. Then Nokia phone, came. Then pager came. Then smartphone came. Now it's a number of version of the smartphones coming. It's changing, and every time it's changing. You can have the example of Kodak, where the Kodak was the #1 brand, and now it's completely finished. Technology has taken over. The printed photo, now it's all coming in the digital. The same way, our profession also. When we started 72 years before, we are just consultant. Then accounting framework came. We were in the single entry system. Then the double entry system came. Then Bahi Khatas to conversion to the computerized system. Then cash basis to accrual accounting. And now it's a complete computerized things are there. Now new age technology is coming, AI, artificial intelligence. When we talk about artificial intelligence, the reconciliation and posting can be done within 3 months of 3 months work. Same way, machine learning, the data of particular organization or company where the mammoth work is required for 3 months work in the analysis can be done it with the 3 minutes. The same way for artificial for blockchain, when we're doing the audit, we require a complete auditing framework. Then in the blockchain, is a complete auditing is there. So time and again, everything changing, and we need to find a new solution. Like recent example, when I see toll nakas, previously is a manual toll cash collection was there. Now it's replaced with the technology. So it's not, things gone changed. Things gone changed. But a newer opportunities been incurred, like in reconciliations. So opportunity is changing the hands, not completely vanishing it. कहीं ना कहीं दूसरी अपॉर्चुनिटी कहीं ना कहीं दूसरी अपॉर्चुनिटी क्रिएट हो रही है. And I feel we should also has to find a other areas of the practice. And I could say, being I'm the chairman of this committee, MNMS, MSME and startup, I could say this is the another area of the opportunity where we all chartered accountant should work on it. It's not like we are not working it. We are working it, but we are not realizing it in the payment because we are partner with the clients in each and every advice. The clients are asking from small advice to us, but he's paying us on the assurance and auditing services, accounting and assurances. उसको assume करता है कि 12 महीने में फोन करेगा उसके part है. But it's different. And when we checked about this MSME, we need to understand what is the scope of MSME and how it's going to be there. And when I've seen it, the entire presentation, and then came to know what is depth of MSME, then I realized this is the area of practice which all should work on it, including me. The MSME Act came in 2006, but MSME before that bill was there, SME bill in 2005, and then 2006 macros were included, and 2006 then it's a MSME. And since then, it's going on to upliftment of the economy for have a greater sense of belongingness in the industries. So MSME Act being created and a lot of facilities being given to them to have the competence with the industries. And I believe there are 4 parts which we need to understand in MSME. In MSME, 6.3 crore MSME is there as of now in the entire India. Out of 6.3 crore, I presume that 95% are micro, 4% are small, and 1% are the medium enterprises. When I'm saying that 95%, 4%, 1%, it's a published data. And the GDP growth from the MSME is 33%. And benchmark is 60% of the global benchmark. In the entire global world, it's MSME is contributing to the economy near about 50 to 60%. In India, we are getting 33%. And the ministry also have the immediate target to have the GDP growth to the 40% immediate target. Then this is slowly 40 to 50, 50 to 60. And everywhere, it's like that. And see that once the target is going to be there, the growth from the micro to small to medium bound to be happen. And after 1st July 2021, there is a increment of the reclassification of the MSME, where the different unit will be also included, where the investment limit is increased to 20 crore, turnover limit is increased to the 250 crore rupees, and widen this. and believe that I think the now MSME should not be lesser than the 10 crore unit. And after include reclassification again further on 1st July 2021, I would say that there's the inclusion of wholesale and retailer. Now just feel, when the industries are 10 crore units, enterprises in MSME, how many units should be there in the wholesale retailer? Must be 2 times. Yes, it's a 2 times, 20 crore unit. 20 crore units. Wholesale retailers are there. And that also Wholesale Retailer Association claiming that we are 20 crore. So in totally, let's see 10 crore manufacturing and service unit and 20 crore wholesale retailer. How many MSMEs are there now? 30 crore. How many chartered accountant in the actively in the practice? I think it's not more than 1,20,000 actively in practice. So see the numbers, how, we have to, provide them services. 1 crore 20 lakh, 1,20,000 members to the 30 crore unit. Let's presume that 20 crore unit wholesale retailer. What is the role of the chartered accountant going to be there? I believe 2. And for industries, in number of area. When facilities, what is going to be there? Let's start again. As of now, how many people are got registered on Uddam Aadhaar registration? 24 lakhs. And there's again scope for inclusion of filing their papers for Uddam Aadhaar registration, which is 20 crore units, and even industry also. What is the benefit of the getting registered in the MSME? Uddam Aadhaar. Number of benefits for the industries and traders also. Their benefits are there. Number one benefit is interest rate, prime lending rate, which are getting 7.5% for industry as well as wholesaler. Second, आपको 2 crore रुपए का कोलेटरल फ्री लोन मिलता है, सबको मिलेगा. तीसरा, there's a lot of schemes in the royalty, in the upgradation, in the GST, in the tax, in the reimbursement of trademark fees, in the reimbursement of the other fees is also like ISO. A lot of things are there in MSME, which fee 50 to 75% is reimbursed by the government. Another benefit, payment protection. And it is there for both wholesaler, retailer, as well as industries. Those MSMEs are there. They can secure themselves in the payment protection. And that is why the wholesale retailer are happy for one reason. One is the PLR rate, lending rate, and second is the payment protection. Because if you are MSME, your payment got stuck from 10 lakh rupees above, you can file your complaint to the Uddam Sahayata. Up, the question came, what are the options are there? यदि मेरा payment फंस जाता है, what is the other option? 138. It will take long time. Civil suit, again 10 years. Insolvency, its limit is increased to 1 crore rupees. We have seen in the insolvency, most of the professionals got involved and the payment got stuck as a corporate debtor. They filed the Form 3 and the payment got immediately. And that is why I'm saying again, this is the area of the practice where the all people, entire chartered accountant can work in this area of payment protection. क्योंकि हमारों को पैसा compliance में नहीं मिलता है. Return filing में 500 रुपए मिलेगा या 1000 मिलेगा, 2000 मिलेगा, 500 मिलेगा, जो भी मिलेगा, सबके अलग-अलग सबसे. But when we are collecting the money of the stuck money, definitely he going to pay us more. because there are professional services are involved, consultancy is involved, filing, appeal, arbitration. And I'm saying that within a 1 year, your money is definitely guaranteed. Whether it's a central government, whether it's a state government, whether it's a private company, your money is protected. And there's provision of the interest also. If you the corporate is not paying, the 3 times interest penalty is there. But seen in the most of the cases, when the arbitration is there, interest is waived. But your payment is mostly secured. So this is the area: registration. Second, payment protection. Third is a bank loan, which we all doing it since long. But उसमें schemes काफी सारी है. हमको मालूम नहीं, हमको मालूम है SIDBI मालूम है, KYC मालूम है, right? But we are not aware of the role of NSIC. How many people are aware of it? I can say I checked with the others, including me. I was not also aware of that. What is the NSIC? And NSIC is also involved in getting facilitation for the MSME with the tying up with the various banks of the loan of the working capital term loan and other loan. And this institutions also funding to the MSME by the tune of 5 crore rupees on the raw material financing. And we should be aware of that, because we have to take the benefit. And second benefit, which I wanted to take, is trades. The platform, I don't know, 3 platforms are there, which is approved by the RBI, and multiple banks are there, where the invoice get discounted of the MSME, where the data are there. And I can say that, if the company is good, the rate of interest is 4 to 5% also. One of my friend who told me about that, he's getting invoice discounting of the ONGC at a rate of 4.5%. I remember the days, 1 year before, the government invoice, nobody's a taker. And nobody's, discounting, and nobody's taking financing. Now it's a platform. Forget it about, I'm saying that there are other platforms also there, which is also financing, invoice discounting, where the investors are there, which rate of interest is more, about 14 to 60%. That is also there. Even the parliament also started, they cleared the factoring bill. In the debt factoring bill, will create a opportunity for the chartered accountant. Near about 30,000 crore rupees knocking the door in this invoice discounting factoring bill. Government is approved in the parliament. So fourth is trades. Even I'm saying export also. What is the export of our country? $350 billion. And the government has immediate target, $500 billion. And by 2025, $1 trillion. And out of that, 20% are not covered or not covered by the LC, means open credit. Let's say example, 350 means to 20%, $70 billion, the transaction happening on the credit. And let's presume that, the credit is happening, how the promotion going to be there, if the accounts are become the NPA due to the COVID and irregular, who is going to fund? Nobody is there. But I am saying there's another opportunities, invoice discounting, export invoice discounting, where the invoice getting discounted based on the bias information, bias credibility, and the rate of interest again 5 to 7% dollar rate. We should take the benefit of such kind of platform benefits. Reverse factoring is there. Back-to-back LC funding is there. Trade finance is another subject which we all need to learn it in the year to come. Coming to the next area of the practice which I'm talking about in this MSME. Of course, we are providing all services, but is a consultancy in all area, like a CFO consulting. Because unless and until we provide them and handhold them from start to end as a specific services, not or part of the account and auditing services, a specific services, part-time CFO consultant. Because the industries also have the consultant. Industry is run by the professionals, not investors. And MSME is run by the family-owned business, and they are doing all each and every work, accounting, auditing, purchasing, sale, all L to the, they are doing it. But I believe that now time is there. They should hire the professional in the eve of competitiveness with the industries. And every MSME should be on the e-commerce platform, because, and we need to guide them. Unless until they're going to be in e-commerce or social media platform, they cannot be competitive, they cannot be on the global map. And we need to serve them. We need to provide them from planning to strategy, to the HR, to the sales, to the legal function, to the executions, and to the investments, all services. And I'm sure about it. When we provide this, there has to be bound to be a inclusion growth of the company. Let's take example. I'll use to give one example is like a hair cutting salon. Like Bapi and Akshar is also there. Like in Bapi nearby area, there's a barber salon, and he has to close this business due to some other reason. Will he get his value? What he will get? I think he will close this shop, either sell it, or if it is rent, leave the rent. And if their furnitures are there, they will sell the furniture, right, Vinay? But if we providing as a consultant, we can find a value. We can find a value like in this vicinity of Bapi, how many people are residing it? तो विनायक बोलेगा कि 10,000 लोग रहते हैं, हर महीने बाल कटाते हैं, 50 रुपया बाल कटाने का देते हैं, राइट? और 10,000 रुपये से 5 लाख रुपए की इसकी कमाई है, साल की 60 लाख रुपए की कमाई होगी, तो क्या वैल्यू होगी, कितनी वैल्यूएशन होगी इसकी? If this valuation packaged will sell it to the some other competitor, or might be a e-commerce chain or a retail chain, Navid, Habib, or whatever maybe, he'll give the value, because ready-made customers. Zomato is what? Zomato is the customers, nothing, all intrinsic value. So we need to find ourselves a business solution provider rather than be compliance provider, compliance service provider. What we are doing from last 30 years, compliance service provider, not a business solution provider. And we were a business solution provider earlier, I'm telling you. But when in 90s tax audit came, 2000 VAT audit came, or service tax audit came, now as the GST came, we become a completely compliance person. We forget to think on the different area, a consulting area. We used to be there earlier. Now I feel let's start again. We should have our separate wing. I'm not saying closing this a compliance work. Let's have the separate wing also, providing the value-added services to the client. And once we provide a value addition services to a client, I'm sure about it. I can say that our client going to have a value additions by way of having more growth in their business. They will pay more tax. They will pay more tax than the economy is going to increase. When the economy is going to increase, the contribution from the MSME on the GDP definitely going to increase. Once this will increase, our Prime Minister Modi vision from $3 trillion to $5 trillion economy definitely going to be on. And $5 trillion economy definitely going to be there with the help of all chartered accountants in the MSME. Because growth is only in the Make in India concept in the MSME area, where the 95% micro unit become a global unit. And more enterprises going to be there. And who going to serve? We all chartered accountant, 1,20,000 chartered, or maybe more those on the jobs will also be join us in the practice area, will serve them. And this is going to be a great opportunity, and look forward this area of the practice. Even in the startup, we are launching a complete portal in the MSME. We launched the msme.ici.org. Members can register themselves as a service provider. Same in the startup service also. We are handling the startup who can be, we going to fund them, all services ecosystem we are building up. But again, in this additional area, we are also going to a service provider to the startup. That's startup service we can direct. And today I'm happy that we are launching a startup certificate course, which is a unique course which we are starting it. So this is the area of the practice. Another, I'm the in charge of the government and financial management, where we bringing the empanelment system, because 2022-2023 की audit पंचायत और म्युनिसिपल बॉडी की कंपल्सरी फाइनेंस कमीशन ने डाल दी है, नहीं तो उनका 50% ग्रांट गोइंग टू बी डेल्ट, एंड पैनल गोइंग टू बी फॉर्म in this year or maybe next year. Then this opportunity also will going to there for the panchayat audit, because there are 260,000 panchayat. An opportunity surely will be there. And for that, I'm happy we have launched certificate course, and 16 batch is running in that. So friend, opportunities are huge. Like in the MSME, we are having a lot of subsidy area. What are the subsidies are there? Whether the food processing industry is to be formed, be there in the Vapi or Bharuch, what are the cluster developments are there? So today we have Mukesh Gulati ji. He will discuss to you the how we professional are work in this cluster development, because in the country there may be more than 600 cluster, and once the cluster development growth is there, and industry going to increase, and we can play important role, because in each and every state we are going to have a our help desk and task force, where the task force will work hand to hand, working with the industries association, and will represent them, will study the various requirement and cluster requirement approach. And in this area, the today lecture of Mukesh Gulati is very, very important. We should understand what the cluster development is going on and what we kind of services we provide. With this, I'll once again welcome to all of you, and welcome the Mukesh Gulati ji onto this webinar, where the all chartered accountants are looking your advice and services, where they can give their valued services. Now, handing over to the Hardik, he can introduce a Mukesh Gulati ji, which is a renowned person, a renowned consultant, so that people should know that what kind of person he's giving their thought process in this. So over to Hardik.
Thank you, Dheeraj sir, for guiding us on the professional opportunities and giving an insightful address for the members in a specific area of MSME. Now I am going to introduce very renowned speaker of this session, Mr. Mukesh Gulati ji. Sir is an internationally acknowledged MSME development expert with focus on clusters, value chains, and business development services. An engineer and MBA from IIM Lucknow, he has set up foundation for MSME clusters, FMC, as a not-for-profit institution in 2005 to undertake a wide range of MSME development initiatives in India. Sir headed FMC for 10 years from 2007 to 17 and subsequently became the senior advisor. Sir had, on behalf of United Nations Industrial Development Organization, in 1996, initiated and successfully steered policy adoption of MSME cluster development as a key approach in India over more than one decade, specifically 96 to 2008. Sir continues to train policymakers and development practitioners in the several developing countries. During his 30-year career, he has authored several publications. So, with these words of introduction, I welcome Mukesh Gulati ji to this online platform and webinar hosted by the Committee on MSME and request to take charge of the session. Over to you, Mukesh sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dheeraj ji, I think we heard you with a lot of insights about the opportunities for the chartered accountants. This is true that MSME space is quite complex and quite big, and it has been underexplored so far by not only the chartered accountants, but most of the business development service providers. One way to look at this whole thing is that there are opportunities for the chartered accountants. I think the other way of looking at it is also that when you said that you want to make India a $5 trillion economy with Modi ji's foresight, then there are a lot of service providers, including the chartered accountants, who are very keen to join this whole concept of nation building. So it's not only me as a chartered accountant who wants to make money out of the whole thing, but also because I am very keen that as a chartered accountant, how can I build the nation? And I think that's a very, very motivating thought. And you basically brought out both the elements very clearly. Today, when I'm going to speak to you about cluster development, I am going to talk more in the sense of nation building perspective. The opportunities for the chartered accountants will obviously come in this whole component, but my focus would be, as you also started with saying that, you know, there are so many enterprises, MSMEs, and many of them are, you know, very small and micro. For their growth, if their GDP contribution has to grow from 33 to 60%, then one very important component that I want to draw the attention of everyone is that when we are talking about a small enterprise, a lot of work for the small enterprise has to be done collectively. It cannot be done individually. Because if I am a small carpenter or an electrician, I am also an MSME. But if I am a small artisan in a village in Jharkhand who sits with his wife to make small baskets of bamboo, I am also a MSME in that case. And all these numbers are included in 6.3 crore. Out of this 6.3 crore, the registered manufacturing enterprises are only 15 lakhs in the country out of 6.3 crore. You very rightly said that more than 90% of them are micro. They are not micro. They are actually own account enterprises, which means there is just one person in the family or maybe maximum husband and wife working together with no hired labor. So both of them are entrepreneurs, both of them are labor also. But they do not have any person to whom they have to pay wages. So more than 90% of 6.3 crore enterprises are these kind of enterprises who do not have any hired labor. So one, of course, is the registered manufacturing enterprises. And then, of course, there are also a lot of service enterprises there are more service enterprises compared to manufacturing enterprises. Unfortunately, in the national context, the data which we have for the MSMEs is very fuzzy, I would say. When I say fuzzy, the last major census for the MSMEs was actually done in the year 2007. After that, there have been more of national sample surveys and all that, by which there is more of an extrapolation of the data rather than a clear, solid census of the MSMEs. So when we say that there are 6.3 crore enterprises, my honest feeling is that we are not very sure of this number. The number may be 5 crores. The number may be 7 crores. We really do not know, because there is no solid way of measuring this thing so far. Now, when I'm talking about cluster development, the concept of cluster development is basically to bring together those enterprises who individually cannot handle their business very well. And therefore, the government has come up with a number of schemes and programs where the subsidies are not given to individuals, but to groups of enterprises. So only if 20 enterprises come together, pool their money, make a special purpose vehicle, a legal vehicle, to maybe set up a common infrastructure, maybe to undertake a common research, maybe do a market research, maybe go to Australia, New Zealand, England to do exposure visits, maybe to test their products in the international market. So for all these kind of things, we are all very familiar about individual enterprise-based subsidies, but most of the chartered accountants are unfamiliar, I would say, about the group-based subsidies. And whenever there is a group-based subsidy, it is very critical that the government, whenever it has come up with any of these schemes, they always say that there has to be some contribution by the group, otherwise the government will not give the money. And there are at least, I don't know, 30, 40 different kind of group schemes. And most of these are called, as I said, cluster level schemes, and in which either the government may ask very small component of contribution like 5%, 10% from artisans, or maybe there are certain type of schemes in which the government is making sure that at least 50% of the contribution comes from the groups of enterprises. So it can vary from 5 to 50%, as I say. And when I'm coming up with my, I'm going to share my screen to show you what is exactly are we going to talk. Are you able to see the screen?
No.
Yes?
No.
You are not able to see. Okay.
Yeah.
Share.
No, it's fine. We can see.
Okay, wonderful. So I have some 45 slides with me, and I have approximately 1 hour with me.
No, you can take your own time, sir.
We'll try to finish as much as in time. And my presentation is quite well detailed. You can actually share it with all the people. They will be able to see this later on, because it is not possible to cover in great depth the entire this thing. But I have given a lot of examples or maybe names and maybe links also wherever possible. So those of you who are interested in taking it forward, actually use this later on. How many participants are there in today's presentation? Approximately?
Must be, 3,000 to 4,000.
Okay. So let us start with what is it that we want to cover today. I think that would be a good way to start. I have basically 4 elements to cover today. First of all, I want to discuss with you what is the concept of clustering. What is this whole idea of clusters? Because there is a lot of confusion both in the government and also in the service provider community and also with the MSMEs on what is the meaning of clusters. And what is this whole idea of clusters? I will spend at least maybe half an hour on this, and then I will go into great detail in one scheme of the government, which is called Sfurti. And the Sfurti scheme is under the Ministry of MSME. There are, as I told you, many more schemes by many different ministries in the country. Many of the state governments also have come up with their own schemes on cluster development. And when I said cluster development, I actually mean group-based schemes. So I will not be able to cover all the group-based schemes, but I will certainly give you a few examples which are very important for all of us to know about, which I will cover in the point number 3, which is called listing of major government schemes for group-based activities. And then I have just one slide on how can a chartered accountant work on these schemes and support the MSME development. So I will just quickly recap. Firstly, we will spend some time understanding what is this cluster and what is clustering, and what are the main features of one of the schemes, which is called Sfurti. We will go into great depth of this. And then many other government schemes are, different combinations of the Sfurti scheme, I would say. Sfurti is maybe one type, but there are many other schemes which we will briefly mention in number 3 point. And then we will come to how can a chartered accountant work on these schemes and therefore help the MSMEs. So let us start with the concept of clustering first. Here we will focus on why do we need group-based activities for local ecosystem-based development framework. Many of you who have gray hair like me must be remembering that some 30 years ago or even 25, 30 years ago, there used to be schemes which were administered by the DICs, District Industry Centers, whose primary target was individual enterprises. They used to get quota for coal, they used to get subsidies for power, they used to get allocation for telephone connection, they used to get different kinds of schemes were there by the government, which were all targeted for individual enterprises. In the year 1990, in Italy, which is very famous for MSME development, there were some researchers who tried to find out why is Italy so good and strong in the area of MSMEs. And they came up with a revelation with the research-based output, saying that they were good because they had excellent clusters. That is why they were doing so well, and the growth was very good. And when I'm talking about clusters, what I actually mean, if you go back to your young age, and if your grandfather or your father used to go to some town or some city or some other place from your hometown, and then everybody remembered that, if you go to Surat, you can find some very good clothes there, maybe fabric, If you go to Bikaner, you will get a great bhujia. If you go to Nagpur, you will get bhakarwadi. If you go to Anantnag in Jammu and Kashmir, you will get bats. So people used to connect the name of a town or a city with a particular product. And women obviously remember like Chanderi sarees. Now, Chanderi is a village in Madhya Pradesh in which people make Chanderi sarees. You must have heard about Kota Doria. It is another fabric which is made, but it is made in a town of Rajasthan which is called Kota. Many of you may not remember, but more than 90% of all the bicycles, for example, and also the woolen knitwear. So everybody wears sweaters, for example, when the winter comes. Almost 80 to 90% of all the woolen wear is made only in Ludhiana. Just one town feeds the entire country. Similarly, bicycles, I think about 80% of all bicycles which are used across the country are made in Ludhiana only. Similarly, there are all names of the places that you can be familiar about. Most of us know about each place famous for a particular product or a service. People go to Thailand and they say they are very good in foot massage. Now that is a service which that place Bangkok provides. Tourism-based clusters are there. Then you have spiritual clusters like Haridwar and Rishikesh, for example. These are also clusters. So you have all type of service providers, workers, and entrepreneurs and factories and all type of businesses which are all around the same type of a product or a service. Now, what basically that Italian study showed was that it was not in the entire Italy because of, that MSMEs were everywhere in the country, but it was only in one part of the Italy where there were such towns and villages and cities where there were these very good products which they were making. So I will tell you, for example, there is just one cluster in Italy which only makes chairs. And almost 90% of all the chairs which they export, they come from just one town called Udine. Now, this is not only in Italy and India. This is something which is happening across the globe. Every country, if you say that US is very good in automobiles, there may be just 3 or 4 cities in entire USA where most of the automobile manufacturing happens. If Germany is famous for its engineering industries, there may be few cities and towns which are very famous for it. So when we talk about either microeconomics or we talk about macroeconomics, so microeconomics is when we are talking about individual enterprises. Macroeconomics is when we are talking about the nation as a whole. 3 trillion economy, $5 trillion economy, national manufacturing policy. We also talk about trade policies. We talk about many different policies which are valid for the entire country. But between the micro and the macroeconomics, the Michael Porter, who is very famous researcher in USA, he said that there is also need for what is called meso-level economics. So when I say meso-level economics, I am essentially talking about these clusters. So Vapi, Ankleshwar, Surat, when you talk about tiles, for example, there are only, other than the very big factories, there are 2 towns in Gujarat which are very famous for making tiles, which we use for our floor tiles or, this wall tiles. Almost all the wall clocks are also made in Gujarat in one town only. Now, how do you develop these towns? The towns are not very good in terms of their whole ecosystem or manufacturing system, then how do we understand what are the gaps, how to improve the economics of that particular city or a town? That is what is called, in very simple terms, clusters. So cluster is, for me, a town or a city or a group of villages in which you have similar type of products or services which are being offered, and they are all complementary to each other, and that place, that town, that becomes then famous for that place becomes then famous for that particular type of a product or a service. Now I will move on from here. So there is something which is called definition of a cluster. So cluster is a sectoral or a geographical concentration. Sectoral means one type of a product or one type of a sector, and geographical concentration means a specific location of enterprises which have common opportunities and threats. That is called a cluster. Now, when we look at the different types of clusters, you can have industrial clusters like textile, leather, auto components. You could have cultural and creative industry like handicraft, handloom, media, heritage, paintings. Then you have cottage and rural industries like jams, pickles, khajur, which is also called dates, tailoring clusters. You have services clusters like tourism cluster, education cluster, IT services clusters. Similarly, you have agricultural clusters. So Nasik, for example, is very famous for onions. Basmati rice is very famous in Karnal and Kurukshetra in Haryana. Tea is very famous in the northeast and also in Kerala. Tomatoes, for example, in certain regions are very famous. So any location which has a specific product or a service which is being provided from that particular area is called a cluster. Now, in India, there are approximately 6,500 different types of clusters, whether they are industrial or they are handicraft or handloom clusters. The list of all these clusters is available on our website, and the name of the website is called clusterobservatory.in. You can actually write it on your piece of paper and you can then check the list of all these clusters. So as a chartered accountant, you should be aware which are the clusters in your area. I will repeat the name of the website. It is called www.clusterobservatory.in. Italy, for example, has 156 industrial clusters. Brazil has 3,857 listed industrial, agricultural, and services clusters. Morocco, which is a very small country in Africa, has 26 clusters. Egypt has 145 clusters, which are recorded there. And I already mentioned to you why this cluster concept is important. And I told you that when we are looking at an individual enterprise, we are talking about their registration, we are talking about their schemes and subsidies for individual enterprises. We are talking about the regulations, and many of the chartered accountants are providing a lot of services, as you rightly said, for compliances because there are a lot of regulations. Financing for MSMEs through banks, for example. The macro ones are related to trade, manufacturing, sectoral priorities, and resource allocation. But as I told you, that there is also something called meso or in between micro and macro, where you have local economic systems, you have business membership organization or industry associations, as they say. BMO means business membership organization or industry association. You have local public institutions, you have service providers like chartered accountants, like technical consultants, like management consultants, like logistic consultants, packaging consultants. All these are called service providers. And then you have local regulatory bodies like pollution control board, for example, at the local level. So how does this system work? This is the whole story about cluster development. So the old model was that the government used to, as I told you, in some 30 years ago, 40 years ago, government was a major driver of the economic development, and all the policy decisions and incentives were all targeted at individual enterprises. But the new model after 1991 liberalization basically says that the driver has to be the private sector, not the government as the main model, main driver. And the private sector cannot do it by itself, and they require collaborative processes among themselves, which means different private sector bodies need to work with each other. And they also need to involve the government at multiple levels, at local level, at state level, at national level. And they also need to involve large companies, teaching and research or institutions. This is the new concept of development. And if that has to happen, then all these institutions become important. So you need funding institutions like government and development banks. You need CSR funds. You need multilateral organizations. You need implementation and local expertise. As I told you, the development organizations. You also need industry associations, farmer producer organization, self-help groups, cooperatives, local service providers, or BDS providers, as I told you, business development service providers. So all of them become important if we have to think of what I told you as the new model of development, where different stakeholders need to work with one another to be able to foster cluster development. So I told you the name a little while ago, saying that Michael Porter is the one who wrote a book. The name of the book was The Competitive Advantages of Nations. Many of you must have heard about it. It is still a very famous book. Basically, it said that a country is not competitive because the nation as a whole is competitive, because there are few towns or few cities which are competitive, and that is what makes the whole nation competitive. This is where he wrote about Italy. This is where he wrote about USA also, wherein he said that if USA is famous for automobile manufacturing, it is not because there are MSMEs and large factories spread all over the country. It is because there are enterprises which are located in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 locations in the entire country. So he said nations compete not on the basis of the entire country, but on the basis of clusters. And he said that therefore it is very important to map the clusters. Like I told you that in India we have this clusterobservatory.in. He made a similar website for USA, in which he mapped all the clusters of USA. For example, Canada also has a listing of all the clusters. European Union has a listing of all their clusters. They have a dedicated website for this. And he explained this whole concept of cluster development methodology. In the year 1991, we had this whole idea of economic liberalization, in which the MSMEs, which were very protected before that, they were removed from protection list. And the government said that they have to compete with the large enterprises. They also have to compete with each other. And all the subsidies and capital subsidies, many of them were done away with. And UNIDO, which is called United Nations Industrial Development Organization, they came to India in 1996. They have been in India for many years. But as far as cluster development is concerned, they started with this first attempt to map the clusters in India. And then they came up with this whole system of how to develop clusters. In the year 1997, there was a committee which was set up by then Congress government called Abid Hussain Committee Report. And Abid Hussain was then before that, the ambassador of India to USA. And he came up with a report on MSME development in which he said that the growth of MSMEs in India should be driven through clusters and not by individual enterprises. And therefore, the government should promote and give money and prepare schemes and programs in which the role of the government should not be to drive the whole concept of enterprise development, but the role of the government should be reduced, and the role of the government should be to only provide maybe some support, some facilitation, some money, so that the private sector can move up and take the developmental sector ahead. So many of the individual level subsidies were removed, and then came up what is called group-based support by the government. So I told you about there are very large number of manufacturing clusters in India, approximately 6,500. And almost 70% of all the MSMEs in India are in clusters. So there are 1,150 industrial clusters, 400 handloom clusters, 3,000 handicraft clusters, rural industries, another 2,000 clusters. And then there are agricultural clusters which have not been mapped, services clusters which have also not been mapped. And And there are 8 national ministries which are now supporting clusters. At least 8. There may be more. My knowledge is also limited. And then there are 29 states which are all implementing many of these cluster-based schemes or programs. And so far, the work has been initiated in the last 20 years on cluster development, at least in 3,500 clusters in the country. Now, that does not mean that all the clusters have been developed, but maybe the work has been initiated, but not much has been done. So maybe out of 3,500 clusters, 200, 300 clusters may have progressed significantly, or maybe 500. But the others, maybe there was just some study which was done in those clusters, and that's all. And some in the 12th 5-year plan, there were some 14 schemes. Now I think there must be about 35 to 40 different group-based schemes, and the total allocation by the various ministries for group-based schemes probably is in the range of about 20,000 crores, which is a very big money, which is now being pumped into promoting clusters in the country. And when I say clusters, I want to show you this map. So here in the center, we have a production system, which means there are a lot of these enterprises, manufacturing enterprises. For example, in Surat, if they are making textile fabric, then all these will come here, the production system. But if they have to get their cloth dyed, the dyeing has to be done by maybe other enterprises, which can be here at the backward linkages. So there can be raw material suppliers. So there will be spinning mills. There will be dyeing factories. There will be then production factories for this. So there are machinery suppliers also. And then there will be very big traders who will pick up this material and sell it maybe within the country, locally, or maybe abroad. And then there are these service providers in which you get designers, testing laboratories, transporters, financiers, chartered accountants. All these will come here as commercial service providers. Then you have public and private support service institutions. And then you have the national policy environment and also the international environment. Now, every cluster has this kind of a system. Now, the system may be working well, the system may not be working well. Maybe the linkages which are there between these service providers or raw material providers with the production people are weak. Maybe these service providers are not good, and therefore the production people are not able to do their job well. Maybe the production people are there, but the selling agents are not good. And because of which, unless all these actors are able to, contribute to the local ecosystem, this whole system will not be able to work in a very efficient manner. And therefore, I told you that a cluster concept is all about how the local system functions, how different actors and stakeholders in the local area, they work with one another. It does not mean that they become friends and they don't compete with each other. It only means that they compete where they need to compete and they collaborate where they need to collaborate. It's a combination of collaboration and competition. And the word for which, therefore, Michael Porter had come up with was called coopetition. Coopetition means cooperation plus competition. So all these actors need to compete with each other, and they also need to collaborate with each other to be able to grow together. So I'll give you an example. If there are very small enterprises, and if they are buying their raw material, and the raw material is, let us say, 60% of their total cost, then if the raw material is so costly and each one is buying 1 ton each, then obviously the price which they will get for 1 ton of the raw material will be, let us say, X. Let's say 100 rupees for 1 ton. But if they buy 100 tons of the same raw material, the 100 rupees per ton will certainly become 95 rupees. or maybe even 90 rupees. It depends upon economies of scale. So clustering means that if 10 enterprises can also come together and they pool their raw material requirement and buy directly from the manufacturer rather than from the local trader, and if they are able to pay directly to the big manufacturer in terms of advance or in terms of cash or whatever, they can get big economies of scale. Now, this is not only in case of raw material, it is also in case of marketing. It is also in case of training. It is also in case of market intelligence, market research. When they have to sell their products and they hire a truck, maybe the truck person will charge much more if they are selling only to sending only 2 boxes. But if they negotiate with the transport company that they need 20 trucks per month, 20 enterprises together negotiate, they will certainly get much lesser price. And if they have to improve their products, also then they need the help of a designer. They need the help of a technical expert who can guide them on how to improve their production system. And not everybody cannot hire a designer because the cost of designing is very high. And when they want, let us say, packaging solutions to their products, and they need a packaging expert, then if each one comes up with his own packaging requirement, the cost will be much higher. But if they can collaborate with each other and say, okay, we need 3 types of packaging only, 20 kgs, 50 kgs, and 100 kgs. And then they have a negotiation with the manufacturer. They can certainly get a much lesser price. So this idea of collaborating and competing together is called achieving economies of scale. And this is one way of helping the MSMEs to become more competitive. So you have different advantages of cooperation, like bulk purchase of inputs. You can have optimal scale of machinery. If I have 3 machines and for the next 2 months I'm only going to use 2 machines, then I can lend out my 3rd machine to somebody who needs it only for 2 months. So this type of systems work very well in competitive clusters, in good clusters, but these do not work very well where the clusters are weak and they are not able to do their job, therefore, well enough. Now in Italy, you have this kind of cooperation and competition, which is at a very big scale. In many of the other, which are, internationally competitive clusters, you will find that this type of cooperation and competition is in a big deal. In the Indian context also, if you go to places like Tirupur, which is in Tamil Nadu, they export about 90% of our hosiery products. And hosiery products means t-shirts, banyans and underwears, etc. They export almost 90% of the India's exports only from one small town of Tirupur, which was not even a district. It was part of Coimbatore. Now it is a separate district. So you find that their association of 400 exporters was very strong. And the work which they have done in the last 20 years is very commendable. When there was a lot of shortage of water for the factories, they could convince the state government and the central government to dig a canal some 50 kilometers away from Kaveri River to bring the water to Tirupur. And this was done jointly by the local industry association. So these are the kind of examples which you will find in all the competitive clusters, but you will not find them in the weak clusters, which are not able to do well. So how can the government help in these kind of cases? They can first of all identify which clusters need to be helped, because not every cluster is capable to grow, because there is a lot of infighting. Different industry associations have competition with one another. They are politicized. So maybe one association is with one political party, another one is with another party. So they always keep fighting and finding faults with each other. So those clusters which are willing to grow and set aside their differences and still look for opportunities to grow, those are the only clusters which can be supported by the government through their policies and programs. So the focus in these schemes therefore will be that if the association or groups can come forward and they come up with their own plan and say, this is where we need your help. So maybe they come up and say that, okay, we need 20 crores for this. We are willing to put in 5 crores from our own pocket. The government should give us 15 crores more. And then we will be able to do this kind of a job. And by this, we will be able to all grow. That is what is called cluster development. So synergies and collaborations, they will certainly need to work with the private institutions, with public institutions, with local academic institutions, with service providers. So a whole range of partnerships will need to be brought in. I'll give you a small example. Chennai, for example, has a footwear cluster. It's very famous for making footwear. And a lot of their growth in the past has been because of CLRI. CLRI is a central institution of the government of India. It is called Central Leather Research Institute, which has played a significant role in giving technical help and know-how to the Chennai footwear manufacturers. But even after growing so well in India, let us say the average price which they are getting for their footwear is 1,000 rupees. But if you go to Italy, in which there is another cluster for footwear, it is called Marche, MARCHE. Now, Italy has this Marche footwear cluster, and they are able to have a wholesale price of 3,000 to 10,000 rupees per footwear, per pair of footwear. Now, where is 1,000? Where is 7,000? There is a huge difference. Why is there so much of a difference? After all, a footwear is a footwear. Now, when you begin to understand that what makes one footwear that is able to command 7,000 rupees and another footwear which is only able to command 1,000, despite the fact that Chennai footwear cluster is the best in India. That is where one needs to do a kind of what is called benchmarking to see whether the technology is bad, whether the raw material which they are using is bad, whether the compliances which they are following are bad. What exactly is the problem in Chennai footwear cluster? Why they are not able to get more money for their footwear? So trying to understand these problems and then trying to link up the solutions for that in simple terms is called cluster development. So for this you need to do business linkages, you need to connect the machinery suppliers, you need to link up the industry association with the industry association, you need to link up the academic institution with the academic institution. All the technical institutions like CLRI, for example, which have done such a good work in India, they need to understand what are the technical institutions doing in Italy. And therefore, they need to go for exposure visit to understand where is a win-win. Because why will the Marche footwear cluster people show that, tomorrow Chennai footwear cluster will grow and then it will start competing with Marche footwear cluster. So one has to find out where both of them can learn from each other. Both of them have the possibility of getting advantage from each other. And this win-win is called collaboration, but they will continue to compete in the international market. Now, I gave you an example of Udine chair. So this one place manufactures 80% of the total Italy's production, more than 50% of the total European production of chairs, just one town. And they have many industry bodies for design, credit facilitation, technical inputs. And they the local industry people set up a company called Promocidia, which helped all the enterprises to market their products, both in the European market as well as in the Asian market also. Now, in India, Mr. Dheeraj Khandelwal was saying that, our enterprises are also facing a lot of new challenges now. We are facing challenges of technology, mechanization. We are facing challenges of digital technology, e-commerce. There is a whole lot of change in this skill development now. Not more than 3% of our entire workers are trained to do that particular job. They have gained an exposure only through learning by doing, but they have never gone through a practical training. And more than 90% of all our workers are essentially informal in the country. And informal means they have never been through this kind of a system. But the rest of the 10% are all in government, or they are in the large private sector companies. And all these informal workers are either in the small enterprises, or they are in the contractual labor, which is working for large enterprises. There is a whole issue of institutional finance. 90% of our MSMEs don't get loan from the banks or microfinance institutions or NBFCs. Social security systems are weak, and there are environmental rising concerns. And there are these need for alternate sources of energy, because people, when they're using coal and other furnace oil, etc., this is causing a lot of damage to the environment, and therefore there is need to use more solar energy, etc. Now, for all these type of challenges which our enterprises are facing, there are individual solutions also, and there are collective and group-based initiatives also. If people can solve their problems individually, nothing like it. This is the best way to move forward. Because if I, as an individual enterprise, can find a solution to my individual problem, I don't have to, find 20 more enterprises to find a solution. I just find a technology provider or a machinery supplier, and I simply pay the money, and then I get the machines which I want, and then my problem is solved. This is the best way. But somehow, if I am not able to do that, then I need what is called a group-based solution. And that is what is called cluster-based solution. So we have finished the first part of my presentation, which was on concept of clustering. Now I will give you the example of Sfurti. Sfurti is one of the schemes of the Ministry of MSME, which is a group-based scheme. And this is meant for Khadi and village industries groups of enterprises. So this is for very micro and very tiny enterprises. Once we see how this Sfurti works, I will give you some examples of other schemes also of the government, which are also group-based. And then we will have a quick look at what the chartered accountants, how they can be associated in it, right? So at the Ministry of MSME, there are some 401 cluster proposals which have been so far approved, for which the government has given 993 crore rupees. So on an average, 2 crores per cluster has been given by the ministry. So far, out of 401 clusters, 145 projects have become functional. And out of this 145, 94 became functional only in the year 2021. Although this scheme has been operational for the last 10 years. So that means most of the work which has happened in the clusters has happened in the last 3 or 4 years, which has resulted in what is called projects becoming functional. And there are 145 more proposals which are pending with the ministry for their approval. And in order to hasten this whole thing, ministry has appointed 61 nodal agencies in the country, whose job is to go and find out where there is a need. And out of which most of them are all government institutions. 28 of them are MSME DIs, which are all part of the Ministry of MSME. But there are also many NGOs, which are also working as nodal agencies. And the organization that I come from, it's called Foundation for MSME Clusters, is also one of these 61 nodal agencies. which is working across the country to find out which clusters need what kind of help, then guide them, and then link up with the schemes, and then promote what needs to be promoted. I will give you further details about this scheme, right? So these are the objectives of that particular scheme. It says that this scheme is meant to basically rejuvenate the artisanal clusters or traditional industries. With this scheme, the government believes that sustainable employment would be given, marketability of the khadi products and village products will happen, and more skills will be improved of the people. The local associations will become stronger, common facilities will be set up, the local artisans will have more improved tools and equipment for their artisans, and they will have better designs. They will be able to sell to the newer markets. They will be able to tap the e-commerce markets, and they will use industry 4.0 norms, solar energy, digitization, lean manufacturing, blockchain, and all that. But a lot of which is written on this page is not targeted, because when you look at the money, most of the money is going for common infrastructure. This is the one which is written here, common facilities. So almost 90% of the money goes to common facilities, and rest of the things is given small amount, maybe 10 or 15%. But the scheme is quite well designed, and you will see it later. You don't need to read every line now. I will request ICAI to share this presentation with all of you, so that you can re-look at what is written in this. And wherever you believe that I have not been able to, I will rush through many of these slides also. You should then be able to go back to these slides, and wherever I have given you some references or links, you should be able to see that, and then maybe through that links also go to the different ministries' websites and understand what exactly they intend to do. So broadly speaking, the scheme is meant for what is called soft intervention and hard intervention. When I say hard intervention, it actually means setting up of physical facility, which means machines, building, land. That is hard intervention. Soft means general awareness, counseling, training, trust building, exposure visit, market promotion, design inputs. All this comes under soft intervention. Hard intervention means, for example, having a godown for raw material bank, tools and technology upgradation. Charkhas have been upgraded, warehousing facility. You set up a training center. You set up machines for a new processing center, and you can have multiple facilities for these different types of products. Maybe a packaging machinery, etc., has to be installed. So all the physical things come here. This is called hard intervention. And for this, as I told you, that the ministry has set up, this is the framework by how which this whole scheme operates. So there is a scheme steering committee at the national level, which is basically part of Ministry of MSME. Then they have set up 61 nodal agencies across the country, so that they can find out which are the clusters which need requirement for upgradation. Then there are project steering committee. For each project, there is a steering committee. So if I told you that there are 145 clusters or 401 clusters where these projects have been so far supported, and under the Spurti scheme, so each project has its own steering committee. This is mostly at the higher level. Then you have a technical agency. Technical agency is exactly what a chartered accountant can also provide. But a chartered accountant is mostly focused on financial inputs, but the technical agency is not only there for financial inputs, but also for technical inputs. Which machinery should be used? How should marketing be done? So management inputs are also given here by the technical agency. So there is one thing called nodal agency, which is basically the fund disbursement agency. Technical agency is the agency which basically guides and provides technical know-how. And it is here that the chartered accountants can either become a technical agency by becoming a maybe an organization, or they can link up with a technical agency to provide the financial know-how. Because most of these technical agencies are weak on the financial front. The detailed project reports which they make are not of very good quality. And here I guess that chartered accountants can add a lot of value. They can ask a lot of good questions. They can do good costing of the products. They can also suggest how the cost allocation and pricing of the product should be done. This is, I think, what Mr. Dheeraj Khandelwal was saying, that we need to become what is called consultants or solution providers. So here there is a role for this. Then there are implementing agencies, and these are those local NGOs or local Khadi societies which have their own land, and they are responsible for implementing the project. So there are three main organizations: nodal agency, technical agency, and implementing agency. The implementing agency sets what is called a special purpose vehicle or a separate legal entity in which the different entrepreneurs put their money, and the bank account is opened in the name of the special purpose vehicle. So, for example, they will set up a private limited company or a public limited company. So the implementing agency sets that public limited company, and that public limited company basically gets the money from the nodal agency to run the program. So the money is given to the nodal agency. Nodal agency gives it to the implementing agency. The implementing agency sets the special purpose vehicle or the legal body. The legal body finally spends the money, and then they serve the cluster people. There is a third party evaluation which is also done. And then this is called the project management unit, for which there is a separate agency which is helping the government, both the nodal agency and the scheme steering committee. So the project management unit helps both these. State government is there for giving land, etc. And the cluster level working committee is basically responsible for linking up with this local special purpose vehicle and the implementing agency. If something is not clear to you, maybe what you can do is you can re-look at this later on. And then there are also Sfurti guidelines. If you just type Google and say, I want to look at Sfurti guidelines, implementation guidelines, you will get a maybe 10-page note on that. It gives all these details as to who is responsible for what and so on. So this is what I explained to you, that there are technical agencies, who appoints the technical agency. Then there are implementing agencies. Somebody has to arrange the land, which is the local implementing agency. Then a preliminary project report is made, which is then approved by the project steering committee. Then there is an opening of the dedicated bank account. Then a detailed project report has to be made with all the components and the cost estimates. Shareholders agreement has to be there with the SPV, which I told you, special purpose vehicle, with the IA or implementing agency. Then it again gets an approval from the project steering committee. It gets uploaded on the ministry website. There is an evaluation which is done by the project management unit, which I showed you at the top. And then it is ratified by the internal committee. Then it is obtained the final approval, and then that 2 crore of rupees approximately on an average is released to the nodal agency. The nodal agency gives it to the implementing agency, and the implementing agency then spends it through the special purpose vehicle. Now, as I told you, the project cost is basically soft intervention and hard intervention, both. And the implementing agency also cost is also included. So if you have a regular cluster where there are less than 500 artisans, the maximum budget is 2.5 crores. If there are bigger clusters where there are 500 to 1,000 artisans in that area, then maximum budget they can get is 5 crores. And in the hard intervention or physical facilities, the cost of construction in case of own building, cost of civil alteration, all that should not exceed more than 25% of the total cost. Land is not included in this thing. So the implementing agency must have its own land already. So the government will give the money for machinery and also for construction, but the construction cost cannot be very high. And then you have uh, these details, which are that for certain type of hilly areas or maybe um, women-owned enterprises, there are certain exceptions which are there, which you can go through these Spurti guidelines and you will be able to better understand it. There are certain things which are not allowed as a part of the project cost, like cost of land, preliminary and pre-operative expenses, only in case of Spurti, by the way. But in many other schemes, preliminary and pre-operative expenses, where the cost of the chartered accountants is also included, are all in are available. In certain cases, cost of land in certain schemes is allowed. Electrification and electrical cabling is considered to be a separate component. Any goods vehicle or generators, for example, is not allowed. Mixed miscellaneous fixed assets cannot be given as a part of machinery, like, for example, generator sets. Working capital is also allowed, but only there are restrictions in that. Technical consultancy fee is a separate component and therefore it is not allowed here. But in certain schemes, this is allowed. Provision for contingencies, erection of machinery, commissioning and all that, it should be included as a part of the machinery cost. But in certain other schemes, the erection of the machinery and commissioning, etc., is allowed. So, you will find that there are variations from one scheme to another one. But if you understand Spurti, then I think you will understand the structure of it. And once you understand the structure, rest are all variations of this. So for all the soft intervention, the government gives 100%. But in certain schemes, the government gives only 90%. In certain schemes for soft intervention, government gives only 75%. But for hard intervention, it gives 90%. But in certain cases, certain schemes, hard intervention, the government gives only 50%. But government gives the entire money for the technical agency, and it also gives the entire money for the implementation agency or the SPV and the manager who has to run that project or that program. This is the role of the nodal agency, which is basically a fund disbursement agency, and it has to see that the money is not being wasted. They are the ones who have to check and do the due diligence. If an implementing agency runs away with the money, the nodal agency will be asked, where were you? Why were you not checking? If the detailed project reports are made by the technical agency, the nodal agency has to check whether the detailed project report is properly made or not. And it is supposed to report to the ministry, it is supposed to report to the PMU, which is the program management unit, and so on and so forth. So these are the things which the nodal agencies have to do. You can go through this later on. And this is the role of the technical agency, which I have already briefly told you what are they supposed to do. And then this is the role of the implementing agency, which also I have told you very briefly what they are supposed to do. You can go through these details later on once you get a copy of this presentation. Now, how do we select these SPVs and the cluster development manager or cluster development executive? So cluster development executive is a very important person who is part of the implementing agency and is responsible for running the entire project at the local level, I am saying. And salary of such a person is paid by the scheme itself. Now, what is the qualification of such a cluster development agency? What should be the role of the special purpose vehicle? How to select them? All these details are given here, which are different for different schemes. But once you go through each scheme, you will be better able to understand this. So the important factors for the project selection and implementation is that it's a very self-selection based thing. So it is not that the government selects which particular cluster should get the benefit. It is the clusters themselves who have to come forward and say, we need help. We are willing to put in so much of money from our own side. Can you give us so much of more money? So either there can be existing clusters, which are called brownfield clusters, or there can also be new clusters, which are called greenfield clusters. Greenfield means that they are currently not making those products, but they want to make, and therefore it is called a greenfield cluster. So this is the constitution and the role of the working committee. Constitution and the major roles. This is the operation manual of how monitoring is done, how it is ensured that the work is being done properly. There is a regular system of checking and maybe having quarterly progress reports, annual progress reports, and monthly meetings to check whether the things are going well or not. So all those factors are built into this monitoring and evaluation system. So this gave you a kind of snapshot of Sphurti as a scheme. As I told you that there are maybe some 30 to 40 group-based schemes in different ministries. This is only one scheme of Ministry of MSME. The Ministry of MSME itself has another scheme which is for MSMEs and not for traditional and rural industries. That name of the scheme is called MSE-CDP. MSE-CDP means Micro Small Enterprise Cluster Development Program. That is for the industrial MSMEs and not for rural and traditional industries. Then Ministry of MSME has another program which is called NMCP, National Manufacturing Program for Competitiveness, National Manufacturing Competitiveness Program, NMCP. Under that program, there are 10 different schemes which are for group-based initiatives, which are not for common facilities, but for example, you need to improve your designs. So 10 enterprises can come together and ask for a support of the very good designer, maybe whose fees is 10 lakh rupees. Then if 10 lakh rupees is the fees, then the 10 enterprises can share 2 lakhs from their own pocket together, 20,000 each, and 8 lakhs can come from the government. So such schemes are there in that NMCP. You can also go through the website of Ministry of MSME. You will find, or you Google search it, you will find National Manufacturing Competitiveness Program, NMCP, in which those 10 schemes are also there. So 10 plus MSE-CDP plus Sphurti together make it 12 schemes. Then there are other ministries in the government also, like Department of Pharmaceuticals, Ministry of Chemicals, then there is Food Processing Industries Ministry, and so on and so forth, some of which I will tell you. But then some of the state governments also have their own schemes for cluster development. Gujarat has its own program. Tamil Nadu has its own cluster development program in which they put in their own money. Maharashtra has its own cluster development program. Uttar Pradesh has recently come up with a program called ODOP, means one district, one product. So like this, there may be 7 or 8 different states which have their own funding for their own cluster development programs. It's already 5:40 now. So let's go to the third section of our presentation. So there it is called Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals, which is under the Ministry of Chemicals. You will find this link here. They have schemes for creation of knowledge products. So if groups of enterprises can come together or associations come together and say they want to do studies, they want to do surveys, or acquisition of books, magazines, they want to set up their own library in their local area, they can set up this with this 7.5 lakh per study or per report. They can also do knowledge dissemination, which is promoted through their industry associations. So they also get money for conducting seminars, workshops, conferences, and so on and so forth. They also get money for setting up of plastic parks, for which project cost is 40 crores and the grant cannot be more than 50% of the project cost. This is also given to the special purpose vehicle, and the special purpose vehicle means that there are shareholders. The shareholders are always private companies, MSMEs. So the requirement may be that 20 MSMEs will come together and set up this legal statute or legal company. The legal company can be a private limited company or a public limited company or a not-for-profit company, which is, I think, under section 12 or 13 under the Companies Act. Earlier, it used to be section 25 company. So you can have these kind of companies, and those type of companies are called special purpose vehicles. So if plastic manufacturers want to set up a plastic park, they can get this 50% of the project cost from the, no, 50% of the project cost they can get subject to a ceiling of 40 crores. That means the maximum money as a grant which they can get is 40 crores. So the project cost can be 80 crores or more. Then there is this Ministry of Commerce, which has another scheme called Modified Industrial Infrastructure Upgradation Scheme, for which again I've given you a link. You can click and you can see that. This is also to upgrade the infrastructure of existing industrial estates, existing industrial parks. This is not meant for, a new one. This is specifically for existing ones. It is also on a similar pattern, maximum project cost, where the government can give a 50 crores, but 50% of the total project cost can only be funded. So 25% has to come in maybe from the state government, rest maybe from the private sector people. Similarly, there is mega leather footwear and accessories cluster sub-scheme. There is a leather technology innovation and environment issues sub-scheme. There is a promotion of Indian brands in leather footwear and accessories sector sub-schemes. I'm not going into the details. You can get all these details on their website. They are very clearly expressed. Then there is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy for development of solar parks and ultra mega solar park scheme. This scheme also offers funding support for setting up of solar parks. And there is an organization which is part of the Ministry of Renewable Energy. It's called Solar Energy Corporation of India Limited. Now, they are the kind of nodal agency through which all the money is actually disbursed. They are also the kind of, so like Sfurti, where there were 61 nodal agencies, here Solar Energy Corporation of India is a nodal agency. And they give money for, per megawatt basis, 20 lakhs per megawatt. So as I told you that this is, the whole administrative control is under MNRE. This was set up in 2011 to promote solar energy among enterprises. And there is a tourism infrastructure development, which comes under Ministry of Tourism. Here also, they can engage, consultants and experts in tourism clusters, for which again DPRs are made. They can also get money from CSR initiatives. They also have to set up their SPV or a special purpose vehicle. And they also get certain money for different types of, activities to be done. They can also, they also get financial support for commerce, trade and industry organization for tourism related events to be organized. They can also have exhibitions, fairs, etc., which local industry association or national industry association can run. And for each program, they can get 10 lakh rupees for each event. Then there is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which also has its own scheme where they provide funds for demonstration and pilot projects, for waste minimization circles. Waste minimization circle is, by the way, a very good program, in which if 10 enterprises come together and they all want to reduce their waste, then all 10 of them can set up or maybe go to a local NGO or an industry association, and or maybe set up their own society, and then they can get all the technical help. If they need somebody's technical support, they can get up to 90%, and only 10% of the money they have to put in on their own for achieving waste reduction and production costs. They also provide money for research, survey and research studies for certain type of institutions. They also give money for clean technology park for showcasing important cleaner technologies, for which again I have given you a link. Department of Pharmaceuticals for our pharmaceuticals and bulk drug industries, and also for Ayush, for example. They also provide money for setting up of common facilities. Maximum grant is 100 crore per park, or 70% of the project cost for CFC, whichever is lesser. A total of 200 crores has been earmarked for this particular scheme. Assistance of medical device industry, the grant in aid is 25 crores, and total 100 crores has been earmarked for this. There are only 2 or 3 medical device clusters in India. One I think is in Ahmedabad, of course. Another one again is also probably in Gujarat. Then there is this assistance for cluster development for Ayurvedic, Unani and cosmetic units. There is a cluster for this, I think, in Indore for this type of work. Dehradun also has another cluster for this. So there are about maybe 10 clusters of this kind. They also give a maximum grant of 20 crores per cluster for 70% of the project cost, whichever is less. So we have completed 3 components in our presentation. We talked about what is clustering. We talked about what is Spurti. And we also went through some of the very important government schemes, particularly the national schemes. I have not given you the details of the state government schemes because it's not possible to cover that in such a short period of time. Now, the last page or last presentation slide is that how can a CA work on these schemes? And it can support, he can or she can support the MSME development. And there is just one slide in which I have tried to summarize what I think is useful for you. I think the chartered accountants, when they are working in one particular area, and because one chartered accountant may be giving services to 5 plastic manufacturers in one's own area, or maybe one chartered accountant may be giving services to 10 pharmaceutical companies. And because that chartered accountant is giving services to 5 or 10 enterprises, that chartered accountant should ideally be able to understand the pain points of the plastic industry or pharmaceutical industry or engineering industry or bicycle industry or hosiery industry, because they will understand the costing of that, where the raw material comes from, where it is sold, what is the production process, how the manufacturing is done. All these things you normally write down in a detailed project proposal when you submit these details to the bank for getting the loan from the bank. And all the chartered accountants keep doing this kind of a job day in and day out. But when you try to look at 5 different types of DPRs for different enterprises, you will come to know that, one enterprise is spending only 30% in the raw material, and the other enterprise is spending 40%. And there are other 4 enterprises which are spending 35%. Now, how is one enterprise able to spend only 30% on the raw material, and the other 5 enterprises are spending 35 to 40%? What is the secret behind it? And if the chartered accountant is able to go deeper into these aspects, then they will be able to better understand the common problems of the enterprises. And for this, ideally, the chartered accountant should participate in the local seminars which are being conducted by local industry association whenever they have conferences, lectures, workshops, seminars, whenever they have exposure visit. The chartered accountant must also educate himself or herself to understand what are they discussing, what are their common issues, how do they want to solve their problems, who are the industry leaders, who are the people who are willing to commit the money to take it forward. Because if there are 100 people manufacturing similar type of product, not all of them will be very enthusiastic. Like in your RWAs, resident welfare associations, there are always only 4 or 5 or 7 people who are working very dedicatedly, and all the others are criticizing those leaders and telling them how, what they should be doing. They have not done this, they promised this, but they did not do this. Similarly, in industry associations also, there is a same case. But if one can find out who are those 5 or 10 industry leaders who are very enthusiastic to solve the common problems of the industry, then by discussing with them what are the possibilities, what are the schemes of the government, how the common problems can be solved with these group-based initiatives, they can help the industry to grow. Now, one has to remember as a chartered accountant, I am highlighting these 5 points which are written in red. Beyond means that any group-based initiative should be beyond the possibility of an individual enterprise. An individual enterprise should not be is unable to do that job, and that is why it should go to a group-based initiative. So this is the first point. If the problem can be solved by the individual enterprise, it should be solved by the individual enterprise. Wanted means that there is a need for it, felt need for it. A lot of people are saying we are unable to do this, we need this, can somebody help? So they are crying for help. Third point is that whatever that idea they have, it should be achievable. They should not be asking for a moon. They should not be thinking of very complex things to do. That we have always been selling in the local area. From next year onward, we want to export to USA. That is not possible in 1 year. So it should be achievable. It should be feasible. Shareable means that it's not that if the project succeeds, that only few companies get the benefit. The others should also be able to get it. Therefore, it should be shareable. And it should be profitable at the individual enterprise level. Enterprises must be able to see that there is an advantage and they are able to take an advantage out of it. So individually, they will be benefited out of it. So these are the 5 prerequisites for any successful group-based initiative. Such a group should have already done some group-based initiatives. They may be small, doesn't matter. But they should have already tasted the fruits of group-based initiatives. If they start fresh for the first time, they are likely to fail. There should be a committed local leadership, or there should be a big buyer who should be involved in that, and that should be pushing, or there should be a big supplier who should take up this leadership role. But there has to be some leadership strongly committed. And as you see that most of the schemes of the government require that land should come from their own people, own side. So either the land should be contributed by the industry itself, or the industry association should be able to get the land from the state government, or maybe from the district commissioner. And they should also be able to pool in their share of the money. So if the scheme wants 25% of the money to be to be shared by the private industry people, they should be able to come up with 25%. Only then they will be able to get rest of the 75% as a part of the scheme. Then, a preliminary project proposal, a detailed project proposal has to be made, a diagnostic study has to be made, and then linking up with that scheme has to be done. The whole scheme has to be understood very properly. And then whatever fees has to be there, in certain cases, the fees is part of the technical TA fees. In certain cases, it can become part of the pre-operative expenses. So the local people should be able to pay the fees to the chartered accountant for that, either on a milestone basis or on a success fee basis or on the output basis. So there can be different combinations. Then one should be able to find out which are those clusters in the local area which are already there. So I told you that on clusterobservatory.in, you should be able to find the list of clusters. So if you are in Surat, you write down Surat and you will get all the 7 clusters which are there. Although you may be already aware, but it gives you a confidence that these are the 7 clusters. So if there are already some projects which have been funded by the government for any of these, then you should also in the knowledge of that, so that you are not duplicating. Because if you go with a detailed project report and the government says we have already funded a similar project 1 year before and we cannot fund another project like this in the same district or the same cluster, then all your effort would be wasted. And then all these DSRs and DPRs you should be able to find by searching on the Google, and then you can try and copy them, you can mold them, you can see how it works. So with that, I am completing my presentation and I will close this presentation. If there are any specific 2 or 3 questions which you want me to answer in the next 5 minutes, I can do that. If you want a very, in future, if you want a more detailed training program for, how to prepare DPRs for group-based programs and all that, you can contact my organization, which is called Foundation for MSME Clusters. We have certain specialists in this area who have been working in this area for a very long time, and they can help, maybe train the trainers or, capacity building, so that more and more people can possibly come forward to do this kind of a job and help build the industry, MSME sector. With that, I will thank you. This is the 2 names of the association website name is given here, fmc.org in, and this is the name of the clusterobservatory.in, which I told you. So you can go into further details on our website. With that, I thank you for your time, patience, and hearing.
Thank you, Gulati ji, for such a insightful and splendid session. There are a few questions from our members that I would request you to answer. First question is whether professionals are also covered under MSME for their consultancy services.
Yes, they are. In the total database, all the professionals, if a carpenter is covered, a professional is also covered. Now, the only difference is that whether you are registered or not. That depends upon you. That is your voluntary this thing. But in the total list of 6.5 crores, if a small basket manufacturer in Jharkhand village is covered, a chartered accountant is also covered, certainly. All professionals are covered.
How can MSME be listed?
How can MSME be registered?
Listed.
Listed?
Yes.
That's a very complex and a difficult question to answer. Listing, you mean on the stock exchange? That's what you are saying.
Yes, members.
There is a MSME stock exchange separately. Please Google search and check the ways on how it can be done. As an organization and as an individual, I have never been engaged in listing processes. So my knowledge is extremely limited in this area. But please look at the MSME stock exchange. There is one which gives you probably all the guidelines for it. Next.
Next question is, practically, are there actual examples of some cluster development of MSMEs, and in which state and in which sector?
I told you about 145 clusters which are operational in Spurti. Similarly, for MSc CDP also, there are at least 100 clusters which are operational. If you go to the website of Ministry of MSME, they have given the list of all these functional clusters. And now some clusters or some projects of the clusters have been successful. Many of them have been failures also. It's a mixed baggage. But even if 40 to 50% of them have succeeded to improve the condition of the MSMEs, I will still say that the whole scheme is good enough to take it forward. Many of the such clusters are successful because the leadership is very much concentrated in 2 or 3 names of the people. So maximum benefit is cornered by maybe 5 or 7 enterprises. But it does not mean that the others have not got the benefit. But there is a mix of all these examples. Some have been widely beneficial. Some have been beneficial only for a few. So there are different examples. Next.
Next question is, sir, can FPO be part of clusters?
Yes, FPO can very much be a part of the cluster. And they can certainly set up maybe their FPO means farmers producer organization. So any FPO, for example, can pick up the raw material and start the common processing, marketing, packaging, designing, supply chain logistics and all that. Yes, the Ministry of Food Processing gives grants for these kind of, and they encourage the FPOs to set up such clusters. Yes, such common facilities.
Okay, okay.
Next.
Sir, all the questions have been asked. Thank you, sir, for your time. I would request CA Pooja, Vice Chairperson from Surat, to give a formal vote of thanks to our speaker, Gulati ji.
Thank you, Vinayak ji. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I, CA Pooja Murarka, Vice Chairperson of Surat Branch of WRS of ICAI, extends my formal vote of thanks to Mr. Mukesh Gulati, sir. Sir, it was very insightful knowledge sharing webinar. You have covered vast schemes and policies of government at the central level. I am sure this would be useful for us in our regular practice area. Thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time to upgrade our member participants. Thank you all these participants for taking active participation in the webinar. And thank you all the branches, Rajkot, Bharuch and Vapi, for getting together for this webinar. I hope everyone has been upgraded with the knowledge you have shared, and this will be useful to them in future endeavor. Thank you for everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gulati ji. We may now go offline. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, sir.